So when you're removing shadows and things like that, you could see that her leg had created that shadow underneath. You can leave them in if you can get it to match up perfectly, or you can just darken it down a little bit later once you've merged those together. Yeah, it's fun working with toddlers like that and creating some, different kind of things. But you saw in my images before we started photographing that, you get that really great connection with those toddlers. And when you're in your studio, it's just you and your client. So there's nothing else to sidetrack them. We've had a little bit of an opportunity to get to know each other. I've shown them my toys, my dolls, all those things. And we've built that relationship also with the clients. And when children sense that their parents have gained that trust with you, it's easier for them to trust you as well. So now what I'm going to do is turn off these layers here to have a look at where I've missed erasing. If you were using a mask, you would just use your backslash key to bring on your guide. But you've got to do it the way that it's easy for you. And in our industry, it's funny how many people are told to do something a certain way. And I mean, unless it's the wrong way and you're clearly doing something wrong, figuring out a way to do it for yourself and making it yours is really important. But I do also sort of highly recommend learning the right way or learning the rules of anything, photography, Photoshop, and then breaking the rules. So we'll leave that there. And we can sort of put those together in a little bit. But there we go. That's pretty much how I would composite two images together. And I could crop that as a square. I could extend the background, but I'm probably going to make this like a 10:8 ratio, because if I made it a 12:8, I'm going to have a lot of negative space on one side, and I'm actually going to bring down the space above her head, or both of their heads. And I would love to have a little bit of free space above them. So doing a 10:8 ratio is actually going to suit this setup really well. But I'm also looking in my composition here, because we've got a little bit longer I can go for. My horizon line is slightly off, so just fixing that, Command-J, Command-T, and I can just rotate that slightly, and then I can start to blend in my backdrop. And I'm looking at the bucket and making sure that it's level. Horizon lines can have quite a big impact on an image. And if you're having a few issues with getting it straight, you can turn your guides on, all of those things, or quite simply, drag that top layer over to the edge of the page and have a look at those lines compared to the edge of the image. And then the same with the horizon line that way. Drag it to the bottom. Are my horizon lines straight or crooked? So you can do anything that's quick and easy for you that you know is going to work. So straighten that up there. And then you can turn the background layer off, and with your eraser. Bit of a soft edge. Just erase those lines back there. And at the top to blend your backgrounds together. And then I would come in and crop that at about a 10:8. And then I would just clone that background where I need to. So yeah. Any questions while I'm fiddling here?
Oh, we have one in the studio audience. Yep.
Do you recommend using an 8:10 crop, or what's your
It depends on the image.
Yeah.
I think it'll always depend on the image. Like I was sort of saying about that 12:8 ratio, it's quite long. And when you've got a a setup like this that's kind of like square in the way that it's composed. If you did that as a 12 by 8, you would bring the crop down.
Do you personally go in and change every image aspect, or do you just like batch crop?
No, every image has its own crop because every image is styled and set up for a specific image. So yeah, some images look better as a 12 by 8 and some look better as a 10 by 8. But if this was to be cropped at a 12 by 8, this is kind of what it would look like. I would be really pushing the top of that frame to the little girl's head. It's not bad, but if I wanted to give it more space, then I'm going to end up with a lot more negative space in that frame as well. So that was just to give you an idea. And when I am cropping, I'm leaving the resolution blank so that Photoshop leaves the maximum amount of pixels within that constraint. So it's just the ratio that I'm going for. Rightio. So where were we? We were going to clone, weren't we?
Yeah, just to see a little bit preview of what the final would be like without Dad and all that.
Rightio. So when you're cloning, you're going to get that repetitiveness. So you can see just there, that area that I just did. See the little line there and there? If you continue to do that in your image, you're going to end up with some really yucky areas and blurry areas as well. So when I'm cloning in a background like this, there's a few ways you can do it. You can take part of the backdrop from another area and put it on there, but when you're shooting with these light sources like natural light and continuous lights, part of your image is going to be lit more than the other side. So selecting from an area that's lit the same way will help, but we don't have a lot to work with here. So when I'm cloning, I'm always selecting from a different area so that I'm not going to get that repetitiveness, and the opacity is quite high. It's up there near the 90%. But we've got like this beautiful texture in this backdrop, so I want to keep that in there. So I'm going to kind of sample from different areas. So cloning is not something that, I like to spend a lot of time doing, especially if you've got a blanket, what we were talking about before, when you're removing arms and things like that, because you end up with just, areas of the image that just don't look right. And you can see it, like when I was judging the print comp awards, a lot of images, you could see some of those cloning issues that were there. I already know that I'm going to be spending a bit of time sort of adding a vignette and softening those edges, but I still don't want to make sure that I've got a heap of repetitiveness going on with my cloning as well. And then over here.
Do you ever find by pre-cropping down to like 8x10s that when you have to do print orders that you've cropped too much and that you can't quite fit the same everything that you want to on the final print product? You have to go back and kind of get creative on extending and things like that?
Yeah, no, really good question. When I hand out my my pricing and information, it is actually states in there that each image is creatively and artistically edited by me. So what they're getting is how I see the image to look. And it also says when they purchase a package from me and they also get the digital files, they get an information sheet that explains to them that, printing this at a different ratio will alter the image, and that if they want to please contact me and I would be happy to guide them through it. But the majority of the time, like, my products are kind of set up in a way that if, for example, they were choosing between their 30 by 40 canvas and they couldn't decide between two images, and one was a 12 by 8 ratio and one was a 10 by 8 ratio, then I would be able to talk them through that process and be able to say, okay, well, this particular image might not print to that ratio, but it will print to this ratio, which is very similar. So we can either do it at that size at no extra cost, because it's just changing that ratio. And the majority of the time, my canvas company, when I either increase the width or decrease the height to make it fit, it's not a huge price difference, and I'm willing to do that for my clients, definitely.
Kelly, how long would you actually take for an image like this, for a composite? Like, what's your average time?
Probably about 5 minutes.
Okay.
But I have been doing this for a while. So I'm talking at the moment, I'm explaining all my steps. If I wanted to come in, then, it's always a bit of a funny thing with Photoshop, because, when we're starting out and we're learning all the different techniques, we don't really want anyone to know the mistakes that we make. It's like anything. It's like sitting and doing an exam and having someone follow you over your shoulder. You don't want anyone to know what you've done. So being able to sit here and show you, like, this is it, this is what I do, that's a big thing for me, because for a long time, it took me a while to get, my editing down packed to where I wanted it to be. Like years and years ago, I would sit there and look at my images and go, why don't they look like such and such as images? Or I want it to look like that, I don't know how to do that. And it wasn't until I was actually hired as a retoucher for a wedding photographer that I learnt lots of things. And I learnt what not to do and what to do. And then I developed my own style from there. So lots of shortcuts. And Photoshop is such an incredible tool to know how to use, because there's 1,000,001 ways to do everything. So do it your way. Know how to do it properly before you break the rules, but develop your own style, and don't ever be afraid to say, look, I'm editing a JPEG file. Like, if my JPEG file is shot with my 5D Mark III and the exposure is perfect, the composition is perfect, I barely need to crop a single millimeter off it, and all I need to do is just touch up skin and stuff like that, that image is perfect for my clients, and it's going to enlarge to a really big file. But I don't need to justify myself to other photographers because that's how I do it. It's none of their business what I do. I can edit a JPEG file and enter it into a print award and get a gold award, and the judges wouldn't even know. But that's my business, it's nobody else's. So don't ever feel like you have to do something a certain way because somebody has said, no, you've got to do it this way, that's wrong. Like, you know what I mean? It's something that you have to learn with time, and Photoshop is just one of those things that, there's still so many things I don't know how to do. And I play on here all the time, and I'm still learning. I love watching Lindsay Adler's workshops on CreativeLive and learning all of her techniques, so that, when I want to try something different, I know what to do.
We have a question in our studio audience.
I just had a question about your canvases. Since this one is so tight in, do you generally, for your canvases, like most of canvases are sold as a wrapped canvas, would you just add an edge for your canvases that are the same color as the backdrop, or would you do something else? Would you have like a solid black or a solid white, or how do you work your canvases when they're tight like that?
That's a really good question, actually, because I've been asked that before. And the canvas company that I use in Australia, called Brilliant Prints, unfortunately they don't ship internationally, but if you are in Australia, they do incredible canvases that offer a 75-year lifetime guarantee. They offer a mirrored image. So when I go in and I select, it's actually mirroring the 3 inches, not 3 inches, sorry, the 3 to 4 centimeters around the frame. So if you've got something that's hitting the edge of the frame, I would select a color. But if you've got a little bit of room like we have here, we could clearly mirror this image and it would sit beautifully on the wall. So the actual edge of the frame is mirrored from the inside of the frame. So yeah, it does look good. But the majority of the time, I would go with a white. But that's something that if I was having an issue, I would contact the client and say, what color are your walls? Because if they're a dark color like this, I wouldn't put a white edge around it unless I was going for a specific look. I'd go with more of a charcoal. So get that information from them, yeah, definitely.
Sorry, going back on the crop, when you set that as 8 by 10, and for an example, the client wants something else that doesn't gonna look as good as that, would you tell them, and even though they still want their actual size that they've got in mind, would you say, yes, or would you say, but that's just not gonna look right at all? What would you do? Because it's your image, after all, on their wall, and then it would look bad for you because it doesn't look right. What would you do?
It's our job as a photographer to guide our clients. We have to tell them how it's going to look. And you're right in saying that, because a lot of clients, if they do get digital files, like years ago when I used to do more digital files and less products, because I didn't value myself or the products that I was selling, I was like, oh, the clients just want the digital files, that's easy. So what I did was, I would give them, say, an 8x10, or a 12x8 of a ratio. Not that it's not cropped to that size, it's just that ratio. So I remember doing a little boy with his twin baby brothers, and he was laying down and he had a twin in each arm. So it was a 12x8 because it was quite a wide image. But she had ordered a canvas from a cheaper company online, and she'd ordered it because it was on sale at a specific size, and when it got delivered, both of the twins were cut off halfway through their heads, and she was mortified. So she contacted them and they said, oh, just order another one. So she ordered another one, and it was just as bad. And then she ended up contacting me terribly upset, and I said, on the information sheet that you were provided with, they are cropped to a specific ratio. If you want to print outside that ratio, like if this is a 10x8, and let me just bring up my crop again. So if you want to print it as a 12x8, you're going to cut all of that, extra part of the image off, so you're going to alter it. So I explained that to them in the information, but it is surprising how often people don't read all of the information that you provide them with. So it became a really costly expense for her. So it's just a part now in my business that products are a huge part of what I do, because I want my work displayed in their home, and I want it displayed the way I intended it to look, which is really important. I intend for certain images to look a certain way, a square crop. So if someone said, I love this square crop, but I want to order this package, but the canvas has only come in this size, then I'll just talk them through that process and go, right, we can print it as a square crop at this size. What size wall do you have that we can do that? We have to talk to them, we have to communicate and find out as much information about what they want and find the best product to suit them.